Greetings and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching the Plan, Install, Configure, and Manage Transport, which is part of the 70-341 Core exam for Exchange 2013. The subsection that we're focusing on in this lesson is Troubleshoot and Monitor Transport. In focusing on Troubleshoot and Monitor Transport, this objective, according to the Microsoft exam specifications, may include, but is not limited to, interpret message tracking logs and protocol logs, troubleshoot a shared namespace environment, troubleshoot SMTP mail flow, troubleshoot domain secure TLS, troubleshoot the new transport architecture, and, given a failure scenario, predict mail flow and identify how to recover. It's a lot wrapped up in one lesson, but keep in mind, troubleshooting is not really an exact science. It's more of an art. And so there are some base concepts that you look for in order to troubleshoot. There are specific steps that you might take, certain ideas that you might have. But ultimately, every problem is unique. And so you have to be somewhat of a detective in order to really track down where problems are coming from. Our scenario involves our working with a company called Print in Plastic, and so they're really focused around 3D scanners and printers. The problem they're having is that mail flow has stopped for no reason. In addition, a mutual TLS connection isn't working. So in this case, we're looking at this and thinking, all right, mail flow must have worked at some point, and now it's stopped. All right, so what causes mail flow to stop? If it was working at some point in time, then why has it stopped now? Do we have any monitoring tools on the scene? Do we know if perhaps services have stopped? Have we looked at things like the queue viewer? So you see, this is important. It's important to know what was configured before, what was working, and then when did this stop and has anything changed to cause it to stop? At the same time, with this MTLS connection, this sounds like something that never worked, so that gives us a starting point for tracking down. Perhaps it's a connector configuration issue, perhaps it's a certificate issue, so we have quite the mystery before us. Our goal in this lesson is to review some of the basics to troubleshooting and monitoring Exchange 2013. Troubleshooting is easier when you have canned starting points to check for issues and you know how to use the art of deduction. Okay, so let's get started. For starters, let's talk about message tracking. The message tracking log in Exchange 2013 is a detailed record of all message activity, and this activity is tracked as messages are transferred to and from the transport service on mailbox servers. We'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but it's good to note that the transport service is the only one that can queue messages. So there are three services, as you know. There's the front-end transport service, the transport service, and the mailbox transport service, but it's the transport service that actually queues messages. And so message tracking helps us to see what messages have been transferred to and from that transport service. The message tracking log details records of message activity as messages are transferred to and from the transport service on mailbox servers, to and from mailboxes on mailbox servers, and to and from edge transport servers. So we can use message tracking to really help us determine mail flow analysis, we can use it for reporting, and we can use it especially, in this case, for troubleshooting. Now, you can use the EAC, the Exchange Admin Center, and that's what we're going to take a look at in a moment. But you can also use the following commandlets to configure message tracking. So there's the set-transport service and the set-mailbox server. You use these commandlets for message tracking configuration tasks, and they assist you in enabling or disabling message tracking. In addition, you can use these commandlets to specify the location of message tracking log files. You can specify the maximum size for the individual message tracking log files, which the default is 10 megabytes. You can specify the maximum size for the directory that contains the message tracking log files, the default being 1000 megabytes. You can also specify the maximum age for the message tracking log files, the default is 30. And you can enable or disable message subject logging in the message tracking logs, and the default is that it is enabled. You can also use delivery reports through the Exchange Admin Center to search for delivery status of messages. So this is a tool that you can use to search for delivery status on email messages sent to or from users in your organization's address book. So you can track based upon certain subject matter, and you can track delivery information about these messages. And what's really neat about this is that the tracking is for messages up to 14 days after they were sent or received. So it's not that you can see the content of the message itself, the message body isn't returned. However, in the delivery report, the subject line is displayed in the results, and so you can search based upon that. Let's jump over to our Exchange environment and let's take a look at message tracking. Alright, so here we are on our Exchange 2013 Client Access Server, and we are looking at the Exchange Admin Center. And even though we mentioned that you can actually configure the message tracking through the Exchange Management Shell, the fact is you can configure quite a bit of it through the Exchange Admin Center as well. So the way that this works is you actually choose the server, and you go into the properties of the server itself from the server's feature, and then you can see here down at the bottom transport logs. And by default, the message tracking log is already enabled, and here's the default path. Now the thing is, this path doesn't mean anything on this CAS server. This path is actually something that's going to be useful if we wanted to check the tracking logs on the mailbox server. So we see that this is already set up. We see that there's a connectivity log. We see that there are also protocol logs. And so all of this can be found on the mailbox server under the transport roles folder under logs. And then you'll see that there are a variety of different logs that are being maintained. So let's just take a moment. We'll jump over to the mailbox server itself and take a look at those logs. Alright, so we're on our mailbox server, and so we're just going to take a quick look at the logs here. We go to Computer, we go to Program Files, Microsoft Exchange Server v15, and then if we look over here under Transport Roles, Logs, you can see a variety of different logs that are being handled here. And so we look under Message Tracking, and you can see the logs. Now, what exactly do we intend to learn by opening up these logs? Well, the answer is nothing. You see, we can't read these. So we know where they are, and that's great. We know that the message tracking is enabled. We know where the logs are actually going to be stored, but we don't actually read the logs from here. Let's jump back over to our CAS server, and let's take a look at MailFlow and look at the Delivery Reports feature, because that's actually the feature that helps us to read the message tracking logs. Alright, so from here, if we just go over to MailFlow, and we go to Delivery Reports, we can see here that we can use the various dialog boxes here to use the message tracking to find out information about messages that have been sent to or from a specific person. So we can narrow the search down, but let's just do something simple. Let's just click Browse at this point, choose one of the individuals in our organization, and let's just click Search. And here we can see an email was sent from Alan to the administrator. Here's the subject. Notice the sent time. It doesn't tell us the content of the message. Instead, if we double-click, you'll note it gives us a delivery report with information about the message itself and how it has traversed within our organization to get to the mailbox. So you can see how message tracking and using the delivery reports option under MailFlow is very helpful in terms of troubleshooting MailFlow within your organization. Okay, let's jump back over to our slides and let's talk about a few additional MailFlow problems that you may have to troubleshoot as an Exchange administrator. So another type of problem when it comes to MailFlow and transport that may come your way includes shared namespace issues. Sometimes it's necessary to share an email domain between two email systems, and this is also known as a shared SMTP namespace. So this happens when there's an acquisition that takes place, two organizations that may have email systems that are currently in place. Now, why you don't leave them alone and let them just continue to run? Well, it's possible you're looking to merge the two together. You're working on perhaps a single namespace that will handle both. So there's a lot of different reasons why you might do it this way. But ultimately, Exchange has this ability. So basically, you're looking to share the namespace, and you're going to do this by creating MX records that point toward your Exchange server for two different accepted domains. So you need to make sure your MX records are established properly. Otherwise, mail will not come into your organization, and it will not go to the Exchange server that you're establishing as the relay server. And then you need to make sure that you create this accepted domain on that Exchange server, and you need to make sure that the other Exchange server you're sending mail to is listed as a relay domain. So the first thing is to make sure that you have an accepted domain that is for that other namespace, and then you configure it as an internal relay domain. And then you need to make sure you have a send connector configured to make sure mail is routed properly. So this is all part of knowing where to look if there's a problem of this sort with a shared namespace. Check the MX records, check your send connectors. There are some other areas that you might want to check and research, because when you talk to others who have shared namespace issues, they bring up issues when it comes to research they've done where perhaps they needed to establish contacts in each organization. And so this actually comes up pretty often. Sometimes NDRs are actually sent back when using a shared namespace. So some question why NDRs are kicked back without contacts being established in the other organization. And so this can happen when recipient filtering is occurring on the Exchange servers or on a server running perhaps a third-party anti-spam product. So email is rejected that's addressed to invalid recipients. So what happens with a shared SMTP namespace scenario is that it's possible that when an Active Directory check is made, the Active Directory does not contain all of the valid recipients for all of the organizations sharing that namespace. So there are a couple of things that can be done in this case. For one thing, you could disable recipient filtering. That would prevent the NDRs from being delivered. You can also configure the product to do LDAP queries against directories that share the namespace. Or, and this is what most folks do, you create contacts. So by using contacts, now those contacts go into Active Directory, and so it gives the ability for the organization to deliver mail without having it kicked back with an NDR. So you basically have to set up contacts in each organization for the users in the other organization. Now, another tool that is very helpful when it comes to determining problems with mail flow is a tool called the Queue Viewer. Queue Viewer helps determine if an Exchange server is not sending mail because of a blocked message queue. So you typically open this tool, you look to see what's causing the problem, you find the message that's blocking things, and then you delete that message. So usually deleting the message causing the error will typically restart the queue's flow, although sometimes you might have to restart the server, or at least the services. So the Queue Viewer is actually an interesting tool because it's one of the few tools that are left in our toolbox. So with Exchange 2007 and 2010, we had a toolbox, and that was part of the Exchange Management Console. It was right at the bottom. But now with the Exchange Admin Center, a web-based tool, even though message tracking has been moved into that tool, the Queue Viewer is actually still on the server itself. Let's jump over to our Exchange server, and let's take a look at where to find this Queue Viewer and take a look at how it works a little bit. As you can see, from within the Exchange Admin Center, under Mail Flow, there is no Queue Viewer. And we could click through all the other features and we still would not see a Queue Viewer. This is one of those tools that is actually still left in the toolbox. So if we just go to our Start screen, notice there's an Exchange Toolbox tile that we can click. Alright, and so here you can see we don't have a lot of tools. We used to have additional ones, but not anymore. And so in Exchange 2013, we have the Details Templates Editor. This is something I don't think anyone ever plays with. There's the Remote Connectivity Analyzer, which is actually a website verification, so you don't really need the toolbox for this. This is more of a link to take you to the website itself. And then we have the mail flow tools, the Queue Viewer. If we open this up, all right, and so here you can see the Queue Viewer. You can see that we have the mailbox server that's being looked into at this point, and we can connect into the other mailbox server if we'd like. Here we can see that there are no message counts in terms of delivery. We can select this, and notice we can view messages, we can suspend the queue, we can remove messages. You'll notice that with removing messages, if we just expand this out, we can remove them with NDR or without sending NDRs. That's non-delivery reports. Now, before we kick this off, I actually sent out a message through the queue. So if we go up to Messages, we'll see if that message shows up here in a moment. And you can see the message that was just sent from the administrator is right here in the queue. You can see in this case the queue is not really giving us any problems. It says the system has already processed this message. We see recipient information. You see now it already just jumped out of the queue. So if the queue had a problem, you could very quickly find the message that is blocking things up. You can take a look and see what the cause of the problem might be, but ultimately you have the ability to delete it from the queue. And so that should get things flowing again. That's the value of the Queue Viewer. It's not a very fancy tool, and it doesn't need to be. It really just needs to show you where the problem is so you can clear the pipes a bit. Let's talk for a moment about troubleshooting domain secure TLS. Quite often, a problem with TLS, transport layer security, is connected back to certificates. So you recall we've talked about this before. You're looking at a situation where we connect to a partner organization. So whereas normally you send email out to the internet and it goes to recipients based upon the MX record, or through a smart host, which also then uses MX records on the internet in order to find the recipient servers. Either way, mail gets delivered without a problem. Well, when you create a partnership with another organization and you create send and receive connectors that are very specific toward that organization, and then you establish TLS and mutual TLS, there has to be certificates in place. And those certificates have to be configured properly. The send and receive connectors have to be configured properly as well. And so oftentimes when you are having a problem of this sort, you'll see event IDs kicked back that relate to certificates. So here's an example. Event ID 11005, the source is the MS Exchange transport, and the rule name is the transport layer security TLS certificate for the specified partner domain couldn't be validated. So oftentimes the certificates might be a problem on your end, but in this case it looks like the problem is actually on your partner's end. So if that partner domain couldn't be validated, you might want to check with them and make sure that their certificates are configured properly. You can also do research based on the event ID or based upon the various error messages that you see coming back, and research that in order to find out if others are having a similar problem and find out what they've done to rectify the issue. With a new transport architecture, it's important to be able to understand the way it works in case you have to troubleshoot it. So it's good to know that only one of the 3 transport services in Exchange 2013 can queue messages locally, and that's the transport service. So that's important. The other thing is it's good to know what tools you can use in order to test mail flow. So you can use the test-mailflow commandlet to help you to diagnose problems with your flow of mail. And one of the ways you can use it, and there are several different examples you can find through PowerShell, is you can use test-mailflow. You can indicate the mailbox and the target mailbox server, and it will let you know if mail is flowing to that mailbox on that server. And there are additional tools that you want to be familiar with when it comes to testing mail flow, when it comes to seeing where problems might be occurring in your Exchange environment. One of those tools involves being able to send a message through a telnet connection. And so there's an article at the end of this lesson that will help you to learn how to send messages through telnet. because this is one of the essential ways that Exchange administrators test for problems. Now, normally, you either configure or you troubleshoot Exchange. Monitoring is not something that you typically do. And why is that? Because you as a person cannot sit there and monitor Exchange. You can't just sit there and look at your services. You can't just sit there all day long. You have other things to do. And so, really, monitoring is something that requires additional tools. And that's because built-in Exchange uses people monitoring. So you might be saying, what's people monitoring? Well, ultimately, your Exchange is configured, everything is working properly, and then something goes down. Whether a service stops, the server crashes, power outage, whatever the case. And what happens next? Within seconds, you get phone calls. So there's your monitoring solution right there. You know something's wrong. Now, the only problem with people monitoring is it tells you that something is wrong. It doesn't quite tell you where the problem is coming from, what you might do to fix it. It's really not very helpful. It's actually the least helpful of all the monitoring tools. It tells you there's a problem, yells at you, makes you feel bad, but doesn't actually help you in any way or lead you in the right direction. Okay, so going with pure people monitoring built into Exchange, not such a good idea. There are other tools that you might look to. For example, Microsoft recommends System Center Operations Manager. And essentially, you can snap in management packs for Exchange 2013, and SCOM will take those management packs, it will monitor various aspects of your Exchange environment, and it will let you know if there's a problem. So, SCOM is a great tool for working with Exchange. Some other tools include the following. eNow's Mailscape. This is one of my favorite tools because it has a great console with flashing green tiles. And so if there is a problem, those tiles change to yellow or red. And so it's nice and easy to see when there's a real problem going on. There's also GSX's Monitor and Analyzer for Exchange. This doesn't have the big tiles, but it does have colorful circles and things that let you know if something is working properly or not. There's also SolarWinds Exchange Monitor, and the list goes on. There's really a dozen more different tools that you can look into, with a variety of different price tags attached. But once your monitoring tool lets you know that something is not quite working right, what's your next step? Well, again, it's good to have some canned approaches in order to know where to start looking. So perhaps you check the event logs, perhaps you're checking for the various diagnostic logs and so forth, message tracking logs. So it's good to know where to look. But a lot of the information that comes back your way is somewhat convoluted. I mean, let's be honest, when you're looking at the responses to the various logs and things, it might leave you lost. So then, what are the best tools for troubleshooting? The truth is, the best troubleshooting tools include your search engine and the Microsoft forums. Where else can you find blogs, commentary, help from Exchange team members, MVPs, Rangers, and in the trenches gurus, all in one spot? So you really want to make good use of your search engine and certainly the Microsoft forums. Let's jump over and just take a quick look at some of the material that's included in the Microsoft forums. Just in case you haven't looked there before, you'll have an opportunity to see how incredible it is when you have a problem, the answers that come back your way. So just in case you've never seen the Exchange Server forums, you can see here by checking in, you can find different versions of Exchange. In our case, we're working on Exchange 2013, so you can see all of the different subsections you can look into. If we're having a problem with mail flow, we can do some searches in order to find the mail flow and secure messaging section. But note all of the other options in terms of problems that have come through. We can see popular threads. We can look through and see if our problem is here or do a quick search. We especially want to see ones where there's an actual response and where perhaps many have viewed the response. So if we just look at this one, notice this person is having a problem with multi-part mixed messages. And so they explain the problem. They give all of their information that they've pulled in. And now persons are responding. And notice many of them are coming from Microsoft. You can see there. So by having this type of back and forth collaboration with persons that are Exchange MVPs, Exchange Rangers, Microsoft Exchange development team members, really this will help you to get to the root of your problem. The nice thing too is that if you have an answer for someone else, you can help out and pitch in and provide that answer through the forums as well. So this is not just a place to come and take, but it's an opportunity for you to give back as well. At first, you might feel a little bit nervous posting your answers to questions because you might think, well, somebody else probably knows better than I do. But you never know. Sometimes the experience that you've had, especially if you've had the exact problem that the person is facing, if you can benefit them, then great, then post a response. Or maybe you can just lead them off to the article that helped you to solve your problem. So you can see here we have a lot that we can look through for mail flow and secure messaging. We can find out what problems folks are having in a real world environment, and then we can utilize the answers that come back in order to fix our specific problem. So that's the real key to troubleshooting Exchange mail flow. You have a few canned check this first type concepts that you look at. You check to see if things are configured properly. You check to see that services are running. Maybe your monitoring solution is helping you in this regard. And then beyond that, you take whatever error messages that come your way and you search and see if others have had the same problem. 99.9% of the time, you're not alone. Someone else has had that same problem. So make good use of Google or Bing, and certainly make good use of these Microsoft forums. Let's jump back over to the slides, and let's close out the lesson with a listing of additional resources. Here's a list of additional research that I think would be beneficial for you to take a look at. Now, when I post this additional research at the end of each lesson, it's not meant to be a burden to you, but it's meant to really enhance and add to your learning. So take a look at these ones. Message tracking, which is a TechNet article. Troubleshooting certificate validation errors. That's especially important when talking about problems with MTLS. And you'll note that it's based off of Exchange 2010. You can tell because at the end it says V equals Exchange 140. So 150 is for Exchange 2013, 140 is for 2010. There is a really great set of articles by Nuno Mota on the msexchange.org blog site. It's called Exchange 2013 Mailflow. There's a 3-part series there. There's a great article on how to send email via Telnet. That's on ExchangeServerPro.com. That's actually a great blog site by another MVP. And then at the bottom we have the Exchange Server Forums, which is an essential resource for troubleshooting your Exchange environment. So we hope you found this informative. I'd like to thank you for viewing, and I'll see you in the next lesson.